Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. I am really excited for this one today. Ladies and gentlemen, she's gays and theys, everybody on this planet, please welcome my friend Mike Lukas to the show. Hi, Mike.
I know. I can hear them.
Hearing in the background. This is like, we've already been goofing off.
That's what I'm used to.
Oh, yeah. The entrance, the show, we need the theme music. Right. It's funny, like, because I almost forgot to record. We've just been like chatting behind the scenes for 20 minutes, and I looked down and was like, oh, we should probably record at some point. This is all excellent conversation.
That's it. And everything I said then was all I've got. So I'm just going to repeat exactly what I said before.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, my name is Mike Lukas. Lukas with a K. I come from Lithuanian stock, and instead of a C, we use a K, Lukas. I am a comedian turned author. I toured for 24 years as a stand-up comedian and a improviser, and made a living at that. Did some national television and radio and all that, and was comedy clubs and whatnot. And then I decided to hang up my funny shoes and start doing some writing, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And I just created a book that's been released called Finding Your Funny Muscle: How to Create Laughs Like a Pro. Yeah, and so that's when I'm on the tour, Angie. I'm pitching and trying to get a book. I'm a book salesman now. I'm a book hawker. Oh, who needs a book? Who needs a book? You in the third row. You need a book? I got you. I got you covered, sir.
I think I'm going to have to borrow some of that energy, because I have been dragging ass on my own book for like 5 years now. Yeah. But I'm saying it on the show so we can hold my feet to the fire. I am committed to releasing the book this year. In fact, I'll just go ahead and drop this little teaser now. We're working up to my 40th birthday, which is going to be the book launch party / birthday party milestone. And that way I can trick myself into not being disappointed if I am not an instant, like, selling 1 million copies and hitting the bestseller list. Right. I launched a book. Who cares? Let's party.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes, like, especially if you have another business going, your book can just be a calling card. So you don't even have to make money off it. Now, me, on the other hand, I'm trying to do it in a different way. If you're self-publishing and you're trying to make a living at it, you have to publish a lot of books. And so you have to begin. And this book I have right now is the first of 3. The Finding Your Funny Muscle is sort of, like I said, it's how to create laughs like a pro. I sort of break down the laugh creating process and, to kind of teach you how to learn to be funnier. Just sort of like how if you want to learn how to play the guitar or tennis, you learn how that works, and then you practice it and you get better. Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of a very interesting conversation that I've had with some coaching students in the past, and just people in general. There seems to be this really pervasive belief in our culture. I don't know if it's worldwide or not, but here in the States, there are a lot of folks that believe that you have talent or you don't. And right. I'm like, you can have talent and still not excel. You can have talent and still not put in the work to develop the skill that take the talent to the next level. But like, that drives me nuts when people are like, oh no, you're either funny or you're not. Well, you can learn to be funny, and Mike is here to teach you.
Oh, well, and it's such a thing where even people who are already funny, learning how a laugh is created. It's interesting because one of my biggest struggles in my comedy business was I didn't really know what I was doing. I was organically funny. I was funny since birth. And I used to crack adults up when I was, 8, doing material, you know what I mean? So I was like sort of destined for this life, but I never knew how to do it. And then when I was put into a position where I had to come up with more material after doing 2 TV sets, and that had sucked out all the material I had, and I realized I don't really know how to create new material. All that stuff, it took me, I don't know, up to that point, like 6 years of nightly stage work to get that material honed and ready. So then this book is me trying to teach myself how to write actual comedy. And in more extensively than just premise, setup, punchline. That never really helped me. I understood that, but what I came up with was the first thing I was lacking was a comedy lens. And this is for really anybody who's who's wants to have laughs with other people. I say that if you don't have a comedy lens, you're more of a corner quipper, just somebody who's cracking up people and not really memorable or relatable. When you have a comedy lens, you begin to understand what's funny about yourself and what you feel is funny about the world. And then you sort of look through that lens. It's like a porthole, and you look through the world at that, and then everything is reflected on that or through that, and your comedy sort of comes out for that. And then when people hear it and laugh with it, they relate to it and they remember it, and they're like, oh, I'm like that, or I know someone like that. And that's why some of the, or all of the best comics have a comedy lens. You know, Seinfeld is the guy who makes a big deal out of nothing. Dangerfield is he gets no respect. And then now when you hear them make a joke, it's like a friend telling you a joke because you know who they are because of that lens. And so in that book, I teach you how to find yours, and then you apply that to what it's called. I call it the humor blueprint. As Kevin taught us, name it and claim it.
Name it and claim it, for sure. Well, and it's funny, I wanted to go back because you kind of hinted at it, but I know the story behind this and I really want you to share it with everybody, which was you talked about like building up this material for a TV show and then running out and realizing like you didn't know how to create more. So tell us what happened, because I think there are going to be a lot of people that get value from your story.
Sure. Yeah. The show in question is The Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
Yep.
It was a
kind of a big deal, a little bit.
It was a little bit of a, well, to be honest, I like in retrospect, I realized that was like my biggest goal. Like as a comedian, I was like, I want to get on The Tonight Show, and I couldn't get on with Johnny Carson because it was just not, you know, he left, and by the time I could have done it, so Jay Leno was the next host, and it was just as a big deal to me. So, well, the initial story was to get the first one. I auditioned at Zanies in Chicago, and there was about 10 of us, and the booker Jimmy Brogan was in town. They were doing a live broadcast of the show at the Rosemont Theater, and so they wanted a local comedian to be on the show on a Friday, and so I auditioned and I ended up getting it, and it was amazing. It was incredible, but at the last second they called me up and they were like, "Hey, we got another Michael to come on the show instead of you, Michael. Oh, which one is it? Oh, Michael Jordan. Perhaps you've heard of him." And I was like, "Remind me." And then I was like, "Okay, no, I know who it is. I don't know him, but I know who it is." And so Michael Jordan ended up being on the show, and then there was no time for me, so they flew me to LA to do the show, and it went really well. I had a really fantastic set, and they invited me to audition to come back again. I didn't know that they didn't just ask you to come back; you had to take a brand new set and record it and send it to them, and that's how you got back on the show. And so I did that, and I realized by that one that was all my material. I'd been doing it for about 6 years, and I mean I had about 45 minutes of material, but there were like 3 or 4 anchor bits that I sort of had all my other material based around. And so what I had done for that first set was I just scraped together all my best bits and sort of shoved them into this thing. There could have been like 3 separate TV sets, but I just shoved it all in like a casserole and or like a burrito with no filling, just all meat, just in that thing. And it was just. I
like a good meat burrito. That sounded
it
horrible,
was good. It was a good
meat. We're keeping it in.
It was good. It was tasty. It was thick with meat, this burrito, but it just left me with nothing, with very little for the second set. So the second set I did, and I actually put together with my remaining bits the best set I could and submitted it, and they turned me down. Jimmy Brogan, bless his heart, was very nice about it, but he was like, try again. So I had to go and for another couple of months. I was and then I knew like, I'm not going to get a third chance, so I got to make it work this time. So I really worked hard on this and tried to get it to sort of be a little bit of a story, and I put it together and I got it. And then when I sent that one in after much recording and watching it, Jimmy said, we got it. And so I did that set, and there were so many things that happened that made it go not as good as the first one. The set itself was funny and it was getting laughs, but the day before, the morning before, I got a migraine. So I got an aura and a throbbing headache. Ooh, so yeah. to medicate that migraine, I smoked a little marijuana. And then, so that put me in a different state than I was in the first one, which I hadn't done that. And then during my set, someone had an air horn. They were blowing it during my set, sort of as like to get attention to themselves. I mean, it wasn't anyone I knew. They were just, and so periodically during my, all of a sudden that would go out. So the whole crowd would be, looking around. So as a comedian, that's a real distracting thing. And then also during the set, and again, these aren't excuses. These are just things that happen. When you're working at the highest level, shit happens. It happens all the time. And one of the other things that happened was my battery pack that was on the back of my lavalier mic during the middle of one of my sets, it flew off. And so it was flying around me while it was still attached to my thing. So it was like a tetherball, like kind of flying around me, and I'm trying to catch it and throw it down because I knew the boom mic above me was still recording me. So then that was happening, and and I was too new for all those things to get. Any one of those would have been fine to handle, but all of them together, you'd have to be a real experienced comic to handle all that. And I did my best, and I feel like the set went really well. But then when I tried to get the third set, I had no material left. I had nothing that I could offer, and they even had a new booker, and she was like, we're moving on from that style of comedy because they wanted somebody who could tell more jokes. That's the thing that I figured out was I was really good at the punchline and the premise. I wasn't setting up for the joke. That's part of the flex. That's why I call it a funny muscle. It's not a funny bone. Bones are stiff and rigid. The muscles, limber, and it grows when you work it out. So one of the funny muscle flex is when you set up a premise and you tell someone this is what the joke's going to be about, this is the world is going to be about, you get them thinking in a certain way. The setup is you get them thinking about something, the most normal thing you can get them to think about when it comes to that premise. And then the flex is you heighten that in a way that is something they don't expect, that is also satisfies that setup. So it's still something that when it's like, oh, you gave me what I was looking, but I wasn't looking for that thing. And when they get that it still satisfies that setup, that's where the laugh comes. That's your body recognizing that connection. And in my book, I have 36 heightening devices that allow you to flex in a different way 36 different times, like cut back to where you go before the setup happened, cut forward to where you go after. So anyway, I have all those things now that I could have used back then, because to get back to your original question, when I was ready to do another TV set, I didn't know how to do that flex over and over again at at my comfort of my desk. I had to be on stage to do it. And it was just, it was too much. I couldn't get the material together. And that was really frustrating. That was actually the most frustrating part.
That sounds frustrating. And I mean, I think so many of us stall out on going for something big like the Tonight Show because of fears of something like this happening. Like, what if I'm not good? Or my favorite with creatives, what if I'm just a one-hit wonder and that was my best idea? So I'm actually kind of curious, like, how did you find your motivation to like get it all together? And like, keep in mind for all you Gen Zers listening who are going, who the fuck is Michael Jordan? Michael Jordan was a big deal. He was Kobe Bryant. He was LeBron James of our age. Mike is talking about putting together actual tapes, VHS, rewind, I don't know what kind of film you put together, but we're not talking about point your smartphone and shoot. Like, this is a lot of work to put a reel together when Mike was aiming for this. And so I don't know, just the task of going back and looking at all your stuff, recording new stuff, putting those tapes together, looking at it, adjusting, how do you find your motivation?
We had to carry a camera with us, and it weighed 5 pounds. And people
uphill both ways in the snow.
Oh, it was horrible. They had tapes. You had to pull the tape out and put it in something else, and then you had to rewind it. You had to rewind.
Kind rewind.
Right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. But you kids don't even know what the rewind is.
But I'm curious about that. Like, what? Why didn't you just give up with that first one and go, oh, that was the best one, I made it to Tonight Show? What kept you going?
Oh, well, I was always just really hungry for attention. So there's nothing that was going to keep me from getting more, you can kick me down, but I'll get back up, because I wasn't in the business to be that. Like, I wasn't in the business to because the best thing about stand-up is, you can be on TV, those TV sets, those 2 Tonight Show sets. And I did a Conan O'Brien set that went really well. And I used a premium blend on Comedy Central and, a bunch of other stuff. And those really took me, those were all I needed, because then I could be a headliner and I could work club to club to club for the rest of my life. And I wouldn't have to do any more. So I knew that there was no damage to it, as far as that go. But ego wise, I mean, I want to be one of those comedians that goes on the Tonight Show 10 dozen times. And it's like, you know, he's a regular here and that kind of thing. And I couldn't be that. I mean, even if I wanted to be that guy at the time, I couldn't come up with that kind of material because I didn't understand the mechanics of what I was doing. That's one of the things that I was very guilty of for a longest time. Is I was a ready, fire, shoot, or what is it? Ready, fire,
ready,
aim.
fire, aim. Yeah.
That trope. I was guilty of that all the time. And in terms of stand up, I was organically funny. So I was headlining way before I was supposed to, before I learned all my scales, you know.
Yeah.
Like if you're a musician, you got to learn your scales so that when you're playing those songs, you can do those moves. And so
that's the talent versus skill thing that I was talking about. Exactly. Because I have the same ability, not with humor, although I have a natural knack for that. And we'll circle back to it because we had some interesting things to talk about ADHD diagnosis before we started recording. But there were things I would say when I was younger that everybody would like be laughing. Oh my God, you're so funny. And I'm just like, what did I say? I wasn't trying to be funny. I don't get it. So I had to
we're laughing, but we don't.
I had to reverse engineer and understand why I was actually funny. But like my gift is musical. I have an ear for things and I am a natural mimic. And so like I can hear sounds and recreate them. But that meant that I could sing,
by the way.
Yes, I could sing really, really well.
Did you know that? Did you know you can sing? I just want to let you know.
It's taken me a long time to acknowledge it objectively. Like I'm a really good singer. Not one of the best, I don't think, but I'm pretty good. And I was singing the way I taught myself to sing, which means I had no idea for technique, breath support, or control or anything like that. Yep. And I would literally choose songs where I screamed out my voice, for lack of a better description. Like I would literally lose my voice singing because I didn't know how to do it any better. And then I realized like there's a difference between having a natural aptitude for something and then taking the time to develop your skills so that you can be as good at it as you want to be. So like, natural aptitude toward funny on Mike's side, natural aptitude toward music on my side. And we both still had to work at it.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's why I wrote this book. The book is like truly, it's a book that I wish I would have had when I was starting out as a comedian, because what it would have done for me, it was first of all, would have allowed me to know what is my comedy lens. Here's how dumb I was as a comedian. I tried to have no one called it a comedy lens back there, but you just sort of like, what's your brand or what's your take? And my first one, like Seinfeld is the guy who, makes a big deal out of nothing. I was the pale guy from Florida. That's what I thought was funny. It gets its laugh, and it was true. I started in Orlando, but what it doesn't do is give the audience a clue about anything about me that they can't already see just by watching me walk on stage.
Too bad Florida Man wasn't a thing back then, because I could see Florida Man being a funny lens.
Like I wasn't the foolish Florida Man even. So I don't even know what I was thinking, and I just thought it was kind of ironic and funny maybe. And then the second one I had was equally dumb and ironic and funny in my mind, but not really. Was tall bald comic. Mike Lukas was the tall bald comic. That was me saying I don't know what my lens is. This is the best I can do. And again, nothing you can't figure out by watching me walk on stage. Oh, he's tall, he's bald, but I can't relate to that unless I'm tall and bald too. And I wasn't telling all tall, bald humor, so it was dumb. So what I eventually came to figure out about myself is two things. The first thing I found out in terms of my lens is I suspect, I haven't been diagnosed properly. I'm cyclothymic. I'm diagnosed as a rapid cycling person, in terms of moods. So I was diagnosed with that officially, but at the time they never pegged me as being Asperger's. No one ever and it had such a stigma on it. I never thought to even look at that.
I think Asperger's has changed too. Like there's a different definition to it. Yeah.
No, they just have lumped it back in with autism, because Asperger's, the way I understood it was the functional end of the autism spectrum. So that's how they were able to differentiate between those types. Anyway, I began to do some research on that when my wife began looking into her mental wiring as an ADHD person like yourself. And I just started recognizing the traits of these Asperger's people. And I was like, these are my people. This is how I'm wired. And once I began to realize that, I began to say, oh, this explains a lot why I don't get along with people sometimes in a big group after a lot of times. I can mask and use my humor, but in terms of close, intimate relationships, I always suffered. I was always had a tough time working in groups because I was noticing everything that was wrong and I was pointing it out. And I didn't realize that some people don't want to hear that. And especially not the way I was telling it, which was truthful and honest. Why are you upset with the truth? Well, no, it's just a little bit rough the way, and it was unsolicited.
I heard it phrased once really interesting, and I think you would probably like this definition too, which is honesty and truth without empathy is just mean. And I was like,
it's so true.
It is very true. That really,
yeah, to an aspect, it's like, no, it's the truth. If you can't handle the truth, that's on you. That's not on me. And it's like, whoa, see, that's one of the if you don't understand your wiring, then you fall into that pitfall. You end up not being able to establish close connections with people because, without empathy, you can't have friends. People want that, you'd have their back emotionally in those moments. And so what I've learned is that I have to develop cognitive empathy. I have to have a sub program that allows me to, in case someone seems suffering, don't explain to them why they're suffering is a good thing, because truthfully, here's the big picture part of it. Hug them, give them it's going to be okay. And robot must do now. And at first it kind of feels that way, but then eventually, because I'm practicing it, I'm getting better at that, and I'm now a more empathetic person, especially because I have a lot.
That you said practicing that too, because that's a big thing that I'm about with the communication skills. A lot of this stuff that doesn't come inherently, like if you're naturally not predisposed, inclined to interpersonal relationships, which is an actual psychological intelligence some people are born with. Like if you're not predisposed toward this is something that you're going to have to work at, and it's not going to feel great at first. It's going to feel completely
It's
opposite. No,
but
why do I have to hug
sniff
people?
that up? You gotta, oh yeah, here we go. Oh, I'm nervous. It feels good. I'm alive.
But I've dealt with things like that too. Like growing up, I was always told it was a little bit too much. I never really understood when I was being funny. Like we said, sometimes I was told I was too serious. Sometimes I was told I was inappropriately funny. I never understood that. I still have a propensity and an inclination toward telling a story that I think is hilarious and then watching people's faces, like they visibly recoil and then going, shit, what did I say? How was that wrong? I don't understand. I thought that was funny. Shouldn't everybody be laughing? And like, I will still go into that cycle of like psychoanalyzing it to death. Did I just mess up real big time? Did I ruin my reputation? Blah, blah, blah. But I'm starting to see it like you did. And this is why I wanted to circle back to what we talked about pre-recording, which was, I think that there's just a certain subset of the population that has a different wiring from what's considered to be norm. And we're just now having these conversations that bring it to the light of how many of us think a little bit differently from the neurotypical, as I've heard it expressed. And I find it interesting and funny how many of us seem to gravitate toward creative mediums. How many of us are in entrepreneurial fields because the traditional route is just like so antithetical to who we are and how we operate.
Truly. Yeah, when you're wired differently in a society that's geared towards people who are neurotypical and functional, you're automatically going to be struggling. You're going to be not as effective because it's not meant for you. It wasn't built for you. So you could complain and you could say, oh, boo-hoo, or you could say, well, how am I wired? I can understand my wiring better. And then I could begin to do what we, my wife and I call workarounds, where she calls them dance arounds because she doesn't like work. But where you begin to figure out other ways to handle things, or like you said, practice those skills so you can become better at them cognitively if you have to. Like, so, hey, cognitive empathy is better than no empathy, and that's what I want to have a hat that says that, so that when I'm giving my version of robot empathy, people are like, wow, that's pretty good, robot. Good job. It's almost human. He almost seems human now.
Thank you, Chat GPT, Mike. You were almost feeling things there.
Right. Ask him any question. He can almost answer it. So it seems like he's alive. Yeah. And that understanding of that wiring to me is key to if you want to experience any kind of joy as someone who's wired differently, because if you don't understand, well, my wife and I was telling you, and I'll repeat it, about we have something that we're introducing called the Rocket Ship Club, and it's going to be it's a site in a group and for people, we call them the hidden freaks, the people that are like us who are wired differently, who haven't had a chance to have this discussion, this conversation publicly because it's been so long stigmatized as a mental illness, and nobody wants to be mentally ill. I'm not crazy,
right?
But I'm wired differently, and that's a difference. And if what we're going to try to do is flip that conversation, we're going to try to flip that script so that we can begin to look at this as more like a different wiring that we just need to understand so we can cope better. And that's all we're trying to do. And the thing is we all think that, who are wired differently, without this conversation, we figure that everyone else is wired exactly the same way. And they're somehow, they're just getting it correctly. So what what my wife came up with is her idea is that what she's wired like you, the ADHD, and she calls herself a rocket ship. And the reason the rocket ship is because everyone else is a functional airplane. Airplanes go from Dallas to Cleveland to Houston to Atlanta, and they're very functional. And that's how most people are. Neurotypical people are functional. They can get that done. ADHD people struggle to get those things done. That's because they have a rocket ship that wants to launch. And when you try to get them to do functional things, they look like idiots sometimes, and they're not. They're just, they struggle with that part of it. So my wife says, she always says, I'm not an idiot, but I operate like one. And
if you need me to hit a launch window, I can hit a launch window. If you need me to keep a regular schedule, that's not something I can do.
It's a struggle. And so she pictures it like this. She says, here's all these rocket ships. They're being handed this airplane manual, and they're trying to read through it to figure out how to get from Cleveland to Dallas. But the rocket ship has all different knobs than what's in the book. And they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yes. And so, And so she says that, these workarounds, these dance arounds help you to become a better airplane so you can practice being more functional. And then you have to still take time though to do your rocket ship launches, because that's we're creative and we hunger for that launch outside the box. And if we're not allowed to do that, then what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I love everything that you're saying there. And it reminds me of, I don't know if I've talked a whole lot about why I created the show. I know I've mentioned kind of the inspiration behind my mom and how our mutual friend Kevin told me I didn't need permission from anyone to do anything. But a lot of the inspiration behind this show was exactly like you said with your book. I'm creating the show that I needed when I was coming up as an entrepreneur to show me that like I wasn't the perpetual screw up alone in my corner, with everybody else knowing some secret that I could never hope to possess. Like we're all just figuring it out. We're all convinced that everybody else has the secret and that we're getting it all wrong. We're all just doing the best that we can on any given day. And some of us still manage to find wild success, and some of us don't find wild success. And we're all okay being where we are, who we are. Like, yeah.
Impostor syndrome is crippling, and it's people who are wired differently have accumulated so much baggage from dropping balls accidentally when trying to juggle. It's not like I'm not trying to juggle, but then you begin to believe some of that baggage that's floating through you that you are an idiot. Or like for me, my wife says, because she's ADHD, she says I'm not an idiot, but I operate like one. And I always say, I'm an Aspie. I say I'm not an asshole, but I operate like one often. And and that gets back to the original question, which was about my comedy lens, which I figured I'm an Aspie, but I was unaware of being an Aspie. So Aspie is like just short for Asperger's, if I didn't make that clear. And so what I realized, I was more of an Aspie hole. I was somebody who was unaware of how his need to be truthful and need to be honest and inability to empathize and be as like I say, the world was given if emotions were crayons, the world was given each person given a 64 box of crayons, and us Aspies are given 5, like a pre-K, and our biggest crayon is red. It's just and then so we're operating with 5 emotional crayons while the rest of the world has 64, and we can't figure out what people are saying and doing or whatever. So that's where that's the one half of my comedy lens. And the second half of my comedy lens is and this is the part that really kills me. I can be okay with being an Aspie hole. I get that, it's funny, but this part kills me because I always thought I could be an athlete. I thought I played baseball and I tried to play football on the streets. And I'm clumsy, Angie. I'm like when I played baseball, I remember I tried to throw the ball to the catcher and instead I threw it to the umpire.
Oh wow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was trying, and the guy was like, "What are you doing?" It's not me, it's him. I have no cartilage in my right ankle, so I'm constantly falling. I'm constantly bumping things, and so I've realized that my comedy lens is that I'm the clumsy Aspie hole. I set up this high level of expectation for the world that I put them, I expect from the whole world to measure up, but I'm so clumsy. I can't measure up myself. Like perfect example of that. My daughter was she's in theater and she has a show. And so I'm talking to my wife and my 10-year-old son, like the ass behold, like, listen, we cannot be a distraction. We're in the front row. She's got a big part. We can't embarrass her. She's a teenager. It'll be horrified for her. So everyone, shut off your phone. Put it on buzz. Put it whatever you got to do. And my wife was like, "Okay, good point." I realized that I didn't see her do it yet. My son doesn't have his phone. I remind my wife again. Don't forget, honey. I got it. So then we're part of the show was that we all get a cup of water. Or a bottle of water. And so my son has his juice and I get a water. And I said, don't spill that. It's going to cause a big problem if you spill that. I know, Dad, I'm old enough. I got it. I don't worry. Well, keep it away from the edge, for God's sake. I know, Dad, relax. So the play starts. My daughter's in her big monologue. And all of a sudden I hear I'm like, who the heck? See, that's what and my wife's like, it's in your pocket. I'm like, oh shit, it's my phone. I had
that
it
was
on
me.
And some alarm had gone off and bypassed my thing, and now it's in my pocket, stuck, making that noise, and I can't get it out because I'm sitting down. So I'm struggling to get it out. Everything, all the action stops on stage. I finally get it out and I shut it off, and I want to yell like, these Apple iPhones are just ridiculous to win, but I couldn't. I was just like, sorry. And then my daughter continues the play, and then 2 minutes later, I noticed my wife's futzing around with her purse. I'm like, what now? What are you doing? And she's like, it's filled with water. I'm like, what? I look and I notice I had knocked over my own bottle of water and it had spilled and filled my wife's purse. So,
oh goodness.
So
wow.
The clumsy ass behole was predicting everyone gonna fail, but of course it was me that did all the things I thought were gonna happen. So it was funny afterwards, but not.
Oh yeah. That's what I think that's what allows me to get through rough moments and challenging times, because that's always in the back of my head. Well, this is going to be a hell of a story later. And nobody loves hearing the stories of like, well, I woke up and it was a pretty good day and breakfast was delicious and the cats were well behaved and nothing. And
tell us about when you fell.
Yeah, they want to hear about all the, overcoming the odds and wiped out and got horribly embarrassed. Like, to this day, the best, I've told stories for going on 13, 14 years now. And the most popular story I've got is the time that I fell and accidentally showed people my ass right after singing Tush. And that was like my biggest nightmare come true. And the reason why I didn't audition for bands for years, I'm afraid I'm going to forget the words. We mentioned my lack of vocal training. I'm afraid I'm going to blow a note. I'm afraid I'm going to humiliate myself.
You're going to pull another Tush.
Yeah. And it was great. It was a set ender. Like we were about to go on break. We do Tush, which is super high energy. Everybody's rocking. Great. I forget my purse on stage. I go up to grab it, wipe out wearing my cute flirty skirt and high heels. And the skirt goes up over my butt, shows everybody my undies. Yes. And I remember having undies. Yeah, I know. Thank God. Small miracles. I remember having a thought while I'm literally laying there on my stomach and going, oh no. The show goes on depending on what I do next. There isn't a show if I decide to get up and run away. And that's how I got up and made a joke about, well, I guess I can't sing Tush without showing you mine. We'll be back in 10. Perfect. And
see, but that's where humor comes in, and that's great. And that is so perfect, because you're right. In that moment, you had a decision to make. I can lose. I just failed. I fell. And so that's a failure in terms of a serious musician, or I could laugh about it and because everyone's fallen. And I guarantee you more people remembered that set because of that, and then paid attention to your voice after that to see how you were going to do, and respected you because you didn't fail. You made a choice. I'm going to get back up there and get a laugh. I love humor.
That's the most interesting thing to me, the farther I've gone, because I think we've grown up in this culture, especially with the haters being so loud out there, that they're just waiting for you to fail so that they can rip you apart. And don't get me wrong, there's a certain small subset of that gleefully does that because it makes them feel less like pieces of shit to tear other people apart. Well, they don't have a great life if they're doing that.
There's always people like that. Yeah.
Or they're sociopaths, one of the two. But by and large, people are like rooting for you, I would say. And that's been the biggest surprise the farther I've gone, that like you're nervous on stage, they're nervous for you. You fall down, they want to know that you're okay. Like they're not just going, haha, you fell down, asshole. Like, thankfully, nobody did that to me. Otherwise, I probably would have cried instead of laughing it off with a joke.
You would have still done what you did. You. That was in you. That's who you are deep down, and you had that moment. You made that choice because you're you. Yeah, that was brave though. That was brave because a lot of people wouldn't have made that choice, and they would have just covered their eyes and just ran off, or done that. What's that? The girl that was on Saturday Night Live that got caught lip syncing, where she just does that crazy dance.
Yeah, the dance.
Moves off. But, with your comedy lens, you're trying to figure out a part of you that you might not brag about in the middle of a closed elevator, that part that you're not is totally not like your own core wounds, but more like the parts of you that make you funny and make you interesting. Because that's what I learned about as a writer. Like story is so important. And the reason why story is important is because you're vicariously giving people a ride that they don't have to take on their own. And so if you're going to be a storyteller, whether it's through music or writing, you got to give them the emotional ride, the vicarious journey that they're looking for. That's why they long for story, not for anything else. The plot is just how you get that story across. Your story is it starts it does start with a core wound, and then it's about how life won't let you get away with it anymore. Life, in the beginning of the story, is life said, you're not going to fool yourself anymore. Today's the day you start dealing with this shit. And that's what people tune in for, because they don't, I mean, like you said, some haters want you to fail, but most people want to see you win, because then they can win. They go, oh, it's possible. And then they can feel what it's like to go through that without having to do it yet. Because that's since the dawn of time what we longed for in story.
I love that. I think that's the reframe that I love giving to my students when I'm working with them, which is, what if you could be the one that shows them the way?
Right.
And shows them what's possible. I love that idea a lot more than, oh my God, what if I fail? Well, what if I show them that this is possible? And suddenly we've got a whole army of people who are doing this thing that I had the vision to do. Like, cool, right?
The idea of beginning to develop your own comedy lens, it begins to give you, and a lot of people have never even looked at all at themselves in this way. And so it's not that I'm like no one's psychoanalyzing here, but you're more like just beginning to be a little more introspective and say, well, why am I funny? How do I see the world as being funny? Am I sarcastic? Am I ironic? Am I spastic? Or, am I accidentally funny? Like, what are those things about me that make me funny? And then when you begin to tap into that, your humor becomes way more relatable, because it has that little bit of that element of story that we're talking about. That's why I swear the second season of sitcoms are funnier than the first season, because now we know who they are. We know what their story is about. But so we can begin to tune in and watch vicariously how Kramer is going through his life. Oh, go, here he comes. I know exactly what
they find their voice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but
No.
It's interesting to me how often these things seem to be like cyclical. Like there's a conversation that's happening. And this idea of like finding your voice has been coming up a lot in conversations I've been having lately, especially since I've been working with a friend of mine who's just launched her podcast. And I was one of the first guests, and she loved that because, with my experience now, she wanted somebody who would not feel like, or would, if she couldn't lead the conversation, which was what she was afraid of, she wanted somebody that could help her carry that show. And I thought that was fascinating because she had a natural inclination toward hosting. And also I realized after the fact, I was like, oh, I had taken this whole podcasting workshop that gave me like 20 different resources on how to conduct a good interview. And not only that, I've got over 100 episodes of practice by now. I've gotten a lot of the awkwardness out. And then when I have awkwardness, I can just like play it off and be like, all right, we're going to take that out in editing. A lot of that awkwardness you guys don't even ever hear. But
right. You see the best awkwardness possible. Just trust us.
It's just like this idea that you could workshop it behind the scenes, never put it out in front of somebody until you've got it perfect. I really want that idea to die in a fire. Yeah. You're going to have to put it out there in all of its terrible glory and see what works. And, like Mike and I raise an eyebrow when something works that you didn't think would work. And like, what happened there? All right, cool. Right. Let's get to the bottom of that. What can I do to do more of that? Do I want more of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. And that's like that's kind of like the whole theory between behind improv. I was
Mm-hmm.
trained at the Second City and at Improv Olympic in Chicago and then I toured with the Second City for a while, and then I was in their main stage show in Las Vegas and understudied in Chicago. So I was like drilled the idea of yes-anding and
Mm-hmm.
the idea of listening to what's given to you and then not only accepting that as true, but also heightening it in some way. It's not just a blatant agreeing with somebody, and it's about seeing what's being offered to you and then accepting that as being true and then bringing it to another level because you have so accepted that it's true. And so that to me is a philosophy. I actually teach my kids that because it's not just an improv philosophy, it's a life philosophy. So like you said, with this podcasting things as an interviewer, you might have a whole idea of where you think the interview is going to go, but when you yes and listen, you just begin to make it more interesting because you're heightening what's happening. It's the same with creating comedy material. That's part of my process is you need to begin to accept what you've set up, and then you need to heighten it into a place that you're not expecting. And that's a skill that you can practice and get better at because it involves listening, it involves creative thought, and it involves outside the box thought. And that's why these, like I was mentioning the heightening devices in my book, they kind of they give you 36 different ways you might not have considered to begin to heighten these things where you begin to look at something differently. Like, I wonder what led up to this thing. I wonder what happened afterwards that we don't know about yet. I wonder what it would sound like if the chair in that scene began to have a voice. Like there's all these different ways that you can begin, like I always say like that's when squirrels begin to do accounting. That's when these heightening devices are come into play because you can begin to yes and the idea of the world around you and see it from different angles. And that to me, that's life.
That's so funny because I've always it's so bizarre, but you triggered this idea in me of like, I've always had this curiosity about what's happening to all the ancillary characters.
Yes, of course. That's my bread and butter, Angie.
Like, The Rock just came crashing through your building and went through the other side to go be the hero. And then I'm just left here in my cubicle with my desk destroyed going,
right. Do I call HR about this? I have a glass. I have the report I was working on got deleted, so I would like to still to be paid for that.
Is this HR? Is this OSHA? More importantly, am I getting paid for today?
I missed half my lunch. Am I going to be docked if I take that later?
There's glass in my lunch. Who's paying for my lunch? Like, there's so many unanswered questions. The Rock? What's wrong with you, The Rock? Destroying people's lives.
I'm saving lives. Yeah, well, I'm kind of trying to get my accounting finished. Rock. That's funny. I like that. The idea of the person inside either guy sweeping up the glass afterwards. I swear, if Rock goes through that glass one more time, that's a fourth time this week, and I'm the one I cut my finger the last time. Just Rock.
I think that's why Free Guy was so funny to me because that the video game players get to be the heroes of those stories, but we finally got to hear from the non-player characters, the NPCs in the background and what lives they were living.
Right. That's where humor comes from a lot of times because you you set something up to think normally, and so normally you would think of the main characters, but then when you like, for instance, in the book I reference a joke I did on the Tonight Show about I call it the bed seduction bit, and so I realized later that this was a perfect clumsy aspie hole bit, but I didn't know that this was even my lens. But this is how true it is to me. I don't ever take responsibility for something. I always blame the world. Like that, I'm sort of psychotic like that. Like when I would talk about getting up early and not being able to get up early is difficult, not because I'm lazy or because I'm drunk or hungover, but because my bed was trying to seduce me. So the whole bit was about my bed being so comfortable that it became a seductress. And so on this bit, I do a whole bit, where my bed is talking, Michael, you look good. I want you in me. And so there was a whole, right. And then the climax of it was me snoring, because I fell asleep back in the bed. And then I have to go to my boss and say, I'm not lazy. My bed's a whore, so that was the big punchline of the whole thing. So, but the idea of giving a bed a voice and giving it a personality, and in my comedy lens, to allow it to be the source of something I can blame instead of taking responsibility for myself of why I'm not getting up early. That to me is a deeper level of humor than just being like a corner quipper who's saying, boy, it's tough to get up early in the morning,
No, I totally get that. And I think that This, I've heard some interesting things about, again, those of us that are wired differently. And I read something, of course, I can't remember what the title of it is off the top of my head, but talked about how many of us who tend to fall somewhere on that spectrum of ADHD autism tend to have that night owl wiring too. We're sleeping from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m., where the rest of the world is typically like 10 or 11 to 6 or 7. But I just found that interesting that I've never been able to get on that normal, like 11 to 7 cycle,
But that,
no matter how hard I try.
Yeah. But if that's how you're wired, then I think that's why, like what you were saying before, that a lot of people who are wired like that tend to, head towards a job that allows for that. So freelancing is a perfect example of that. You want to set your own schedule. I always thought that was, people would bust my chops so many times because I would, what you said, have that late schedule. I mean, my schedule would be like, I'd go to bed at 4 a.m. I'd wake up at noon, but it was 8 hours. So I was like, what's your beef? It's the same 8 hours you got. What do you care? And they're like, we got 6. Well, that's your fault. You should have got more for yourself. You're doing yourself a disservice.
I'm mad at you for sleeping more than I decided to sleep. That's ridiculous.
I need you to be as tired as I am. You need to be exhausted because I am.
Logic.
Right. It doesn't make sense at all. Yeah.
Well, and this, I think I laugh so much about how many conversations I have with the freelancers that I coach who expect the business owners that they work with to have some sort of special logic that is not available to most humans. Like, you step into business owner zone and suddenly everything is numbers and logics and pros and cons. And like, we are weighing every decision thoughtfully and carefully. Not like a human is still making that decision and going, well, I slept 4 hours last night and I fucking hate everybody, so we're just going to take this company in a whole new direction. That shit happens. And often it has nothing to do with you as a person, and you couldn't have impacted that anyway. So like, business is full of humans. The world is full of humans. We are glorious and fucked up and unpredictable. And if you can take off your judgy hat and get a little bit curious about it, and okay, well, that makes no sense to me. I wonder why that makes sense to them. Could we dig in a little bit deeper? Then I think we'd all be a little bit happier. A little bit less
think that's
judgy.
the benefit. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the benefit of when you begin to examine your own wiring and how your brain operates, and to even understand that different brains operate in a different way. Like my wife and I, she's like you, like I said, she's ADHD and I'm more of an Aspie hole. And so at first there was a lot of clashing against each other because she desperately wanted me to be more like her, more emotional and more creative and blowing things off for the moment, because this is what I'm into. And I'm tired of being so damn functional. And I was always wanting her to be like me. I wish you were wired more like me, where you get things done and blah, blah, blah. And then you have a schedule and a to-do list and you check things off and you're happy when I notice things and point them out, and and for the longest time,
Mike, tell me what's wrong with me. I need it.
Right. And not just with her, but with everything, just like anything I notice, it's like a whack-a-mole of whatever's the problems that exist. I see them all. And, But eventually what we came to realize is that, you can have a coupling like that if you're more of a yin and a yang. So like the fat part of my yin has to be, helping the skinny part of her yang, and the fat part of her yang helps the skinny part of my yin. That's the whole point of the symbol. And so now all of a sudden, I value the fact that she thinks outside the box and is more emotional, because as a mom and as a partner, she brings that out of me, and I can begin to slowly cognitively get those skills advanced. And whereas she now begins to value, my yang, and she starts to understand that she needs to cognitively work on her function parts, which she has. And so now because she understands her wiring better, she can begin to go, oh, I now realize it takes me forever to get out of the driveway. Like she didn't realize it took her 30 minutes I think she timed it was 22 minutes to get into the car and just drive out. People always accuse her of taking a long time, and she didn't believe them. And then she timed it once, and she was like, okay, I need to be a little more functional in that way. And so she began to be that way. So we began to value what each other brought to the table, as opposed to being mad that she wasn't like me and I wasn't like her. And now we're like a team that works where, I mean, not always, but we're a team that yin and yangs this thing way more often. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a birthday. The kids feel so valued because of you created something that was way out of the charts. And then, and they also got it because it was on time, because dad was in charge of that part. So, you know what I mean? So that's a big thing with your understanding your own wiring and pursuing your joy. Because again, that's the purpose, right? Isn't it?
How
it's gotta be
boring and unbearable would this life be if we were all the same and there wasn't this glorious fuck upness unpredictability, difference of opinion, different lenses and experiences. Like, to me, even for as maddening as it sometimes can be, when, you know, you meet people and you just don't like them or you can't find a way to see eye to eye, like, it's still beautiful to see independent thought, different experiences, different ways of processing. Like, I love us in all of our glorious messiness. Yay, humans.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And once you begin to open your heart to that part of it, you can really embrace people's differences. And you're right, though. We have a lot of haters and a lot of defensive people right now, a lot of angry people. So you have to really sort of wade through that muck. And that's difficult. But in that muck is where the lotus flower grows. You know, that's how they say it. And you have to get in that muck in order to you know, begin that transformation of yourself. And that's what I think freelancing does. I think that's what being a comedian or a musician does, or an artist of any sort, is. And I think that everyone is brought here to, I mean, we all have like our wheelhouse, man. Something about what we do is real key. And until you're doing that, you always have that imposter syndrome. You think maybe I don't belong in the place that I'm at, and maybe you don't. Maybe that's a signal to you that you got to figure out what your wheelhouse is and begin to nurture that. Not necessarily to make a living at it, but begin to bring that out of yourself again. And you know, and I don't know, that gets a little preachy, I guess. Soapboxy.
I freaking love that. I think that's actually the perfect way to wrap things up, which is, you know, if you're not happy where you're at, maybe it's time to start thinking about what you contribute to the world and where you're meant to be and what you could do to find that. And we're here for you. Like, Mike will help you with the comedy. I'll help you with the entrepreneurship. You got resources. Get out there and play in the mud and see if you can find something beautiful. So, Mike, this has been fantastic conversation. I think we're going to have a part 2. So tell us more about where we can learn about you, where we can get this fabulous book.
Yeah, it's called Finding Your Funny Muscle, How to Create Laughs Like a Pro. It's available on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble and soon at Google Books. And also, I'd like to promote my website, funnymuscle.com. This is it's got free content and video blogs and audio blog. Everything I've written, I've also put an audio blog too. So you get, if you're not don't want to sit there and read it, you could just listen to me babble on about it. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot. So far, since March 9th, I've gotten 32,000 separate visits.
Nice. Congrats.
So you can always use more traffic, though. Come on aboard.
Heck yeah. All right. I think we're going to have a follow-up on this one, because I just want to laugh more on this show. And I think you can help with that.
Let's do it. Let's get silly.
Not that I don't laugh with everybody else on here, but like, it's so nice to talk to comedians and creatives. Like, that just makes me so happy. So thank you so much for being on the show, and talk soon.
Yes, of course.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.